I always believed that family ties were sacred. That trust, once built, was unbreakable. But life has a way of shattering even the strongest beliefs in the most unexpected ways. My name is Elaine, and I am 58 years old. 5 years ago, I remarried a man named Richard, 10 years younger than me. I had spent most of my life alone after my first husband passed, so when Richard came into my life, I felt like I had been given a second chance at love. He was charming, attentive, and made me feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. Richard had bonded well with my step-grandson, Dylan. Dylan was in his late 20s, engaged to a beautiful young woman named Lila. I had watched Dylan grow from a boy into a man, always treating him as my own. When he introduced Lila to the family, I was thrilled. She was warm, intelligent, and deeply in love with Dylan, or so I thought. The betrayal no one saw coming. It started with small things. Richard and Lila would often have deep conversations at family gatherings. I noticed their lingering glances but brushed them off as friendly gestures. After all, what could possibly happen between my husband and my step-grandson's fiancée? Then came the late-night messages. The whispered conversations in the corner of the house. The unexplained disappearances during family trips. My gut told me something was wrong, but I silenced my doubts, convincing myself I was imagining things. One evening, fate decided to slap the truth across my face. It was Dylan's engagement party, and everyone was in high spirits. I had left my purse upstairs and went to retrieve it from one of the guest rooms. But as I approached the slightly ajar door, hushed voices stopped me in my tracks. And then, I heard it. Richard's voice. Lila's voice. And then the unmistakable sound of lips meeting in a deep, desperate kiss. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to believe it. But as I pushed the door open, the truth lay before me. Richard and Lila locked in an embrace, her dress slightly disheveled, his hands gripping her waist like she belonged to him. The fallout. Everything after that moment was a blur. Lila gasped, stepping away as if caught in flames. Richard's face paled, but he didn't speak. He didn't even try to deny it. Dylan came rushing upstairs, his face filled with confusion. When I turned to look at him, I saw the realization dawn in his eyes. He knew. Somewhere deep down, he must have suspected. But seeing it confirmed shattered him. What followed was a storm of accusations, betrayals, and broken hearts. The engagement was called off. Lila disappeared from our lives. Richard tried to explain, tried to say it was a mistake, that it just happened. But I knew better. Betrayal doesn't just happen. I left Richard. There was nothing left to fight for. Aftermath, picking up the pieces. It's been a year since that night, and though the pain lingers, I am slowly rebuilding my life. Trust, I've learned, is a fragile thing once broken, it rarely heals the same way. As for Dylan, he's still healing. The scars of betrayal don't fade overnight. But we have each other. We are family, bound not by blood but by shared pain, and sometimes, that is enough. And Richard? He lost everything. But in the end, he made his choice. I never imagined my step-grandson's fiancée would betray him like that. But what happened next? It showed me that even the deepest love can be a lie hidden behind stolen glances and whispered secrets. Elaine had always prided herself on the strength of her family bonds. Despite the complexities of a blended family, she had done everything she could to ensure that everyone felt loved and valued. When she married Richard, a man 10 years her junior, she had no idea that he would become the source of one of the most painful betrayals she had ever experienced. Their love had started like a fairy tale. He was attentive, affectionate, and made her feel young again. Having lost her first husband years ago, she never imagined she would find love a second time, let alone experience the thrill of romance and companionship that Richard brought into her life. She had been convinced that their connection was real, that it was built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. For 5 years, she basked in the security of their marriage, never once questioning Richard's loyalty. However, what she didn't know was that lurking beneath the surface was a web of deceit waiting to unravel. Her step-grandson, Dylan, was someone she had always considered her own. Although not related by blood, Elaine had been in his life since he was a young boy. She had watched him grow, guided him through challenges, and celebrated his successes as if he were her own grandchild. He had always been a kind and responsible young man, someone she trusted wholeheartedly. When Dylan introduced Lila, his fiancée, to the family, Elaine had been overjoyed. Lila was charming, intelligent, and carried herself with grace. She seemed deeply in love with Dylan, and Elaine had no doubt that they were perfect for each other. She was excited to see Dylan build a future with someone who made him happy. She had embraced Lila as part of the family, welcoming her with open arms and treating her as if she were already her granddaughter. What Elaine didn't realize was that behind the warmth of their family gatherings and the laughter shared over holiday dinners, something darker was brewing. At first, the signs were subtle. She noticed how Richard and Lila seemed to have an ease between them, how they would engage in long conversations that seemed to stretch longer than necessary. There were stolen glances between them that, in hindsight, should have raised alarms. But Elaine never allowed herself to think the worst. She had always believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. After all, why would she ever suspect her husband of having any inappropriate thoughts about a woman who was about to become part of their family? It seemed inconceivable. The closeness between Richard and Lila became more apparent over time. There were moments when Elaine would enter a room and find them deep in conversation, their voices hushed as if they were sharing something secretive. She would tell herself that it was nothing, that maybe Lila simply saw Richard as a mentor, someone older and wiser whom she could confide in. But then there were the late-night text messages, the sudden disappearances during family gatherings, and the lingering tension that made the air feel heavy whenever they were in the same space. A part of Elaine wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but the fear of what she might uncover kept her silent. She convinced herself that she was imagining things, that her insecurities were playing tricks on her. The truth, however, was far worse than anything she could have ever imagined. Behind the innocent conversations and friendly gestures was a betrayal so deep that it would shake the very foundation of her marriage and her family. Elaine had unknowingly been living in a carefully constructed illusion, one that would soon come crashing down in the most devastating way possible. Lila had always been a woman who craved validation. Growing up in a household where love was given conditionally, she had learned early on that affection had to be earned, not freely given. When she met Dylan, she saw in him a stability that she had never known. He was kind, supportive, and unwavering in his love for her. Their relationship had started as something sweet and innocent, but as time passed, Lila found herself searching for something more, something unspoken that she couldn't quite define. Dylan was safe, predictable, and deeply in love with her, but she felt a void inside her that she couldn't ignore. That emptiness, that craving for something more, found its answer in Richard. Richard, though married to Elaine, was a man who still carried the charm of his younger years. At 48, he was charismatic, confident, and had an ease about him that made people naturally gravitate toward him. He had a way of making women feel special, as if they were the only person in the room. Lila had noticed this about him from the very first time they met. Unlike Dylan, who always seemed eager to please her, Richard was different. He exuded a quiet authority, a confidence that spoke of experience and control. There was something intoxicating about the way he carried himself, about the way he looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. It was wrong, she knew it, but some forbidden desires are too strong to resist. Their connection started innocently enough. At family gatherings, they would exchange small smiles, subtle acknowledgments that no one else noticed. Then came the conversations, long, winding discussions about life, love, and regrets. Richard had a way of making Lila feel understood in a way Dylan never could. He saw her not as a woman about to be married, but as someone with dreams, doubts, and desires that had yet to be fulfilled. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, in a way that made her feel valued. And slowly, those conversations turned into something deeper, something neither of them wanted to admit. Lila began to crave Richard's attention. She started dressing differently when she knew he would be around, choosing outfits that she knew would catch his eye. She would brush past him in the hallway just a little too closely, her fingers grazing against his hand as if by accident. And Richard, though he knew better, though he had a wife who loved him, didn't pull away. He responded in kind, his touches lingering just a moment too long, his glances filled with something unsaid. They had crossed an invisible line, one that should have never been crossed, but neither of them was willing to step back. The tension between them became unbearable. Every moment spent together felt electric, charged with an energy they both pretended wasn't there. They found excuses to be alone, small moments stolen in the midst of family gatherings. A whispered joke in the kitchen, a hand resting on her lower back as he passed by, the way his eyes darkened whenever she laughed at something he said. It was a dangerous game, and they both knew it. Yet, neither of them stopped playing. One evening, when Elaine had stepped away to take a phone call and Dylan was busy talking to guests, Lila found herself alone with Richard in the dimly lit hallway of Elaine's home. The air between them was thick with anticipation, their breaths shallow as they stood just inches apart. She didn't know who moved first, whether it was her or him, but suddenly, his hands were on her waist, and their lips met in a kiss that sealed the fate of their betrayal. It was filled with hunger, with longing, with everything they had been holding back for months. And in that moment, nothing else mattered, only the fire between them, the overwhelming need to feel something they had both been denying themselves. They both knew it was wrong. They both knew it would destroy everything. But some desires, once awakened, refused to be silenced. Elaine had always believed that the truth had a way of revealing itself, no matter how deeply it was buried. But when it finally did, it was far more painful than she had ever imagined. The affair between Richard and Lila had been brewing beneath the surface for months, hidden in the shadows of stolen moments and whispered conversations. Yet, despite the small signs, the subtle changes in behavior, the unspoken tension in the air, Elaine had never allowed herself to truly confront the possibility that something was terribly wrong. That is, until the night of Dylan and Lila's engagement party, when the truth came crashing down in a way that no one in the family could ignore. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the warm glow of celebration. Friends and family had gathered to toast to the couple's future, clinking glasses of champagne and exchanging stories about love and commitment. Elaine had been in the kitchen, overseeing the final touches for dinner, when she realized she had left her purse upstairs in one of the guest rooms. Excusing herself, she made her way toward the second floor, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. The house was alive with energy, with people moving in and out of rooms, but as she climbed the stairs, a strange unease settled in her chest. She wasn't sure why, but something felt off. As she reached the hallway, she noticed one of the bedroom doors slightly ajar. It was odd, she had closed all the doors earlier in the day to keep the party confined to the main areas. Just as she was about to push it shut, she heard voices, hushed, urgent whispers that sent a shiver down her spine. Richard's voice. Lila's voice. Elaine's heartbeat quickened as she strained to hear. At first, she told herself that it could be nothing, that maybe they were simply talking. But then, there was a soft gasp, followed by a low murmur, and the unmistakable sound of lips meeting in a desperate, breathless kiss. Her entire body went rigid. The blood in her veins turned to ice. She didn't think, she simply acted. Pushing the door open with trembling hands, she was met with the sight of her husband and Dylan's fiancé locked in an intimate embrace. Lila's dress was slightly askew, her hands still clinging to Richard's shirt as if she had been unwilling to let go. Richard's hands were firm around her waist, fingers curled possessively against the fabric of her gown. The shock on their faces was immediate, but neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. The evidence was right in front of her. A sharp gasp from the doorway made Elaine whip around. Dylan stood there, his face a mask of confusion and devastation, his fists clenched at his sides. He had followed her upstairs, perhaps sensing the same unease she had felt, and now he was staring at the woman he loved and the man he trusted, caught in a moment of undeniable betrayal. For a long, unbearable moment, silence filled the room, thick with disbelief and heartbreak. Then, everything erupted at once. Dylan's voice broke through the stillness, filled with pain and fury as he demanded answers. Lila stammered, trying to find the right words, but there were none. Richard, ever the smooth talker, attempted to justify what had happened, but nothing he said could erase what they had just witnessed. Elaine felt her own pain mix with rage, a deep, burning anger that threatened to consume her. The man she had given her heart to, the man she had trusted with her life, had not only betrayed her but had done so with someone who was supposed to become part of their family. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. Everything she had built, everything she had believed in, had been shattered in an instant. Downstairs, the party continued, oblivious to the devastation unfolding above. But for Elaine, Dylan, and the two people who had broken their hearts, nothing would ever be the same again. Elaine sat in the quiet of her empty home, the echoes of the past still lingering in the walls. It had been months since the betrayal had been exposed, months since she had walked away from the life she had once believed was secure. The night of Dylan's engagement party had changed everything. The moment she caught Richard and Lila together, the foundation of her world crumbled beneath her feet. In the days that followed, the pain of betrayal clung to her like a shadow, making even the most mundane tasks feel unbearable. But time had a way of forcing people to move forward, even when they weren't ready. After that night, Dylan had been a wreck. His trust in love had been shattered, and Elaine could see the weight of the betrayal pressing down on him. He had once believed in forever, in the idea that he and Lila were meant to share a life together. But that illusion had been ripped away, leaving behind only bitterness and unanswered questions. He couldn't understand how the woman he loved could have done this to him, how the man he respected had betrayed him so deeply. Elaine had tried to comfort him, to be the steady presence he needed, but some wounds could not be soothed with mere words. Dylan had packed his things and left town for a while, unable to exist in the same space where his trust had been broken. Elaine didn't blame him. Richard, on the other hand, had tried to repair the damage in the only way he knew how, with excuses. He had come to Elaine, pleading for another chance, saying that it had been a moment of weakness, that he never meant to hurt her. But Elaine saw through the lies. Betrayal was never just a moment, it was a choice. A conscious decision to disregard the person who had loved and trusted you the most. She had listened to his apologies, but there was no room left in her heart for forgiveness. She had spent too many nights lying awake, wondering what had gone wrong, questioning if she had somehow missed the signs. She had given Richard years of her life, believing in the love they had built together, and in the end, he had thrown it all away for a fleeting temptation. Lila had disappeared after the truth came out. Whether out of shame or cowardice, she had not tried to reach out to Dylan or Elaine. Her engagement to Dylan had ended that very night, with nothing but a devastated look in his eyes to serve as closure. Elaine often wondered if Lila regretted what she had done, if she realized the extent of the damage she had caused. But in the end, it didn't matter. Regret did not undo betrayal. It did not rebuild trust. It did not erase the pain that had been inflicted. For Elaine, the hardest part was not losing Richard. It was losing the belief that she had finally found a love she could count on. She had spent so many years alone after her first husband's passing, thinking she might never experience companionship again. And when Richard had come into her life, she had let herself believe in the possibility of happiness. Now, she wasn't sure if she would ever trust another man again. The betrayal had left scars too deep to ignore. Yet, despite everything, Elaine was learning how to live again. She no longer cried when she thought about what had happened. She no longer questioned whether she had done something wrong. She had come to understand that some betrayals were never about the ones who had been hurt, they were about the selfishness of those who had chosen to break the trust placed in them. She had lost Richard, but she had not lost herself. And that, she realized, was the most important thing of all.